Greetings, Euro nerds, and welcome to this video explanation of the updated AP History document-based question essay rubric. About a month into our school year, the College Board released modifications to the DBQ rubric, and here is my updated presentation to walk us through that update. So here we go. All right, first and foremost, I like to compare the DBQ to the LEQ and its similarities first. I think one of the most important mindsets you can have when writing your DBQ is in the forefront of your mind, imagine this DBQ is actually an LEQ. They word the DBQ prompts in a way where you can write a lot of information from your own brain. So if you use the same thesis writing style, contextualization, the argumentation, evidence-based argumentation that you're used to in the LEQ, you apply that to the DBQ, you are golden. So imagine a DBQ is simply an LEQ with 7 documents to help assist your argumentation. Okay, so let's look at the 7-point rubric here. First part is our thesis statement. You will note it's identical to the LEQ thesis statement. So you need to have a historically defensible claim that responds to all parts of the question. So make sure it's in your introduction or in your conclusion. For my students, of course, I always recommend writing it in your introduction. And I also recommend essentially writing your thesis in both your introduction and conclusion, because just in case you don't write an acceptable thesis in your introduction, what the AP reader will do is they will flip right to your conclusion and see if you wrote a acceptable thesis statement in your conclusion, sometimes by accident, and you get the point. So that is definitely a strategy to use. Just make sure you're not writing 2 completely different thesis statements in your intro and your conclusion, and then we can't accept either. So that's my recommendation as an AP reader. So thesis statement should not change. It should be the same for the LEQ and the DBQ. Same. All right. The contextualization, that will also be written in your introduction, just like it was in the LEQ. Your contextualization is going to be in your intro for the DBQ. And it's the same exact wording. You take whatever the prompt is, you look at preceding historical events and how they affected the history that's going on in the prompt, and you has to be specific. So my general recommendation is contextualization, 3-ish sentences that have some type of specific evidence not found in the documents is key here, that help explain your thesis statement, the connection to the prompt, the history that's in the prompt, anything of that nature. The key part is specific. The vast majority of students who do not get the context point, it's because they talk too generally. Even though I know it uses the word broader here, it does need to actually be fairly specific. So sometimes an easy recommendation I can make is have like a proper noun in your context, something that is going to help you explain the overall context of the historical timeline that you're talking about. Okay, before I get any further, I want to show you what the DBQ prompts look like. So I'm going to switch tabs here. And this DBQ is from last year's AP exam, so I'm recording this in actually January 1st, 2024. So here we go. First thing, I want to show you the cover page that the College Board gives you. So it's a little bit misleading on the timing here. So right when you open up your test booklet on the day of your AP exam, and you're on section 2. Section 2, by the way, is the DBQ and the LEQ. They actually put them into one time period, and they actually give you an hour and 40 minutes. But the DBQ, you don't write in an hour and 40 minutes. You're actually going to have an hour for the DBQ. What's tough about this section of the AP exam is it's up to you on how you manage your time, because they give you both of those essays in that hour and 40 minutes. So it's really up to you to kind of have that self-time management there. So for the DBQ, you're going to write that thing in just about an hour. And then the LEQ, you would write after the DBQ, and that you should write in about 40 minutes. So Sometimes students will write the DBQ in about 65 minutes or 70 minutes, but just keep in mind, every additional minute you spend on the DBQ is one less minute you have to write the LEQ, which is going to be usually the last thing you write. So, for the sake of simplicity, the DBQ, you have 1 hour to write. Additionally, when you start section 2 of the AP exam, the administrator of the exam is going to say this now begins like a 15-minute reading period where you can read those 7 documents that are in the DBQ and then you can start writing. You can start writing at any point during that reading period here. It's just the College Board suggests that you spend approximately 15 minutes reading the documents and approximately 45 minutes actually writing the essay. So generally I find my students can maybe read the documents in about 10 minutes and then they have an additional 5 minutes to write, which is great. Frankly, you have to do you at this point. So it's up to you in that timeline, sorry. Okay, here is the guidelines of what they tell you to do. I'm going to be walking through that in the rubric anyways, but that's the closest the College Board is going to give you for a rubric. Now, I should say, since this was last year's 2023's AP exam, this is going to be slightly different than what I'm going to show you in a second. So don't take this as a matter of fact, because, for example, this section here is going to change quite a bit. All right, I'm going to go to what the prompt looked like. So you're going to find that the prompts in the AP Euro DBQ are quite specific. Some of the other AP histories are not as specific with the DBQ wording. So if you are an AP student or you're an AP World student, note yours are going to probably look different. But for AP Euro, they've been pretty specific, and they've also been worded in a predictable way since 2017. So one of the DBQs last year is this one. It says, evaluate whether the Haitian Revolution was caused primarily by the spread of Enlightenment ideas or by the conditions of enslavement. So you're going to note, it's like, is it this thing or is it this thing? They have been wording the DBQ prompts as, what caused this event? Was it this or was it this? So let me look at the AP exam from 2022. It says, evaluate whether the English Civil War was motivated primarily by religious reasons or primarily by political reasons. So again, here's the historical event. What caused it? Was it this, religion, or was it this, political reasons? And guess what? You're going to find out of those 7 documents they give you, there's going to be a mix. It's up to you to determine which cause was more important. Was it more religiously based causes or more politically based causes? So you have to make that decision. And then what's really nice about the wording of these DBQ prompts is it allows you to show that nuance. You can say something like, well, overall it was caused by this, but also we see some examples of it being causing by this as well. So use that nuance to your advantage. Okay, I'm going to go back to my rubric here. All right, so we've covered the thesis statement, we covered the context. Now for the significant difference from the LEQ is our document usage. So another way of looking at the DBQ is imagine it's like a very, very short research paper, and the research has already been done for you to a certain extent. And that's kind of what the DBQ is. But overall, though, I want you to think about it as an LEQ that have documents to help you with your argument. That's the way to look at it. Okay, so always 7 documents. That will not change. Unless it does change, then I have to remake this. Hopefully that doesn't happen. All right, so first point on the evidence usage. So there's actually technically 3 available points you can get for evidence usage. I have it split up into 2 sections. That's just my own organization. Just makes more sense to me. So to me, the single easiest point you can get on this entire DBQ rubric is this one. It says, uses the content from at least 3 documents to address the topic of the prompt. All you got to do is paraphrase summary 3 documents in your essay, and you get this point. It technically doesn't need to be connected to your argument to get that point. You just summarize 3 documents in your own words, and that's a point. Please note what I just said. I said paraphrase in your own words. Do not quote. Do not quote. There is a time and place for quoting documents in text. and other forms of writing, but not in the AP DBQ. The reason I emphasize that is because this is a timed essay, and we, the reader of the AP exam, want to know how you understand the documents and how you interpret them. We readers, when we have a DBQ to grade, we have these documents close to memorized. I don't need to have the documents quoted verbatim back to me when I already know what they mean. So paraphrase summary is in your best interest. It shows that you actually understand what is going on in the document. So paraphrase, paraphrase, paraphrase. So to get that first point, you got to do it 3 times. That's it. 3 different documents. That's easy. The second one is where they're going to up the ante, up the challenge. So to get full 2 points here, you got to use 4 documents out of the 7 that actually support your argument. That is key. You're using at least 4 documents to support your argument. So let's say you only used 4 documents in your overall essay. And out of those 4 documents, you misinterpreted one of those 4. So now that knocks you down to 3 documents actually being used, and you can't get that second point. The most we could give you is that first point there. So my recommendation, use all 7 documents. Use all 7 documents. Use all 7 documents. You're going to see why I emphasize that later on when we get to the complexity point, but just use all 7 documents, okay? There are some other strategies I'm sure teachers are going to recommend, but to me, one of the keys to success is use all 7 documents. It gives you plenty of a buffer just in case you misinterpret a couple documents. That's okay. You can still get 2 points here. But the key part is when you use the document, it has to be extremely clear, explicit, that it is supporting an argument of yours, whether it's your main argument or a counter argument, a secondary argument, whatever your teacher uses. It has to clearly support an argument. If it doesn't, we can't give you that second point. So, recap, for my students especially, use 7 documents. Okay, next is the outside information point. So, this section is basically, you have read 7 documents about a certain historical event, the English Civil War, the Haitian Revolution, Romanticism in the early 19th century. And out of those 7 documents, you're like, oh wow, I remember they didn't add in this historical event, this person, this document. And you are going to add additional relevant information to support your argument. You get the point. So look at the wording. Use at least one additional piece of specific, key part, specific historical evidence beyond that found in the documents relevant to your argument. So the key part here is specific. If it is too general, we can't give you the point. If it's like a name drop, like you just simply say the name of an event, say the name of a person, and you don't actually explain it, we can't give you the point. Also, even if you manage to talk about the person correctly, what they did, and you don't actually connect it to your argument, we also can't give you the point. So it has to be specific, has to be connected to your argument. So the way I look at this, it takes at least 2 sentences, probably 3 sentences to get this point successfully. And the nice part about the DBQ rubric, you only have to do this once to get this point. So one piece of specific evidence not found in the documents to get the point. Something I want to note here. Look at the smaller font size here. It says your outside information right there has to be different than what you used in the contextualization portion of your essay. So remember, contextualization in both the LEQ and the DBQ, that's information from your own brain. They do not come from the documents. And then here, this is explicitly stating your outside information has to be separate from your contextualization. So what I have found as an AP reader is sometimes I can only give a student 1 point for either context or for outside information. It doesn't really matter for you guys which one we give you, but it's if we don't see 2 distinct pieces of outside evidence, you're only going to probably get the outside information point and not the context point in that case. But it is up to the reader to make that determination. So make sure it is clearly different evidence from your contextualization. All right, next section is going to be significantly different than the older AP DBQ rubric. So Here, document sourcing, I'm going to make an entire presentation about and how to do this. But basically, when out of those 7 documents, you have to use 2 different documents at least and explain like the historical background of the document and how it affects the way the document was written. So for example, say you get a document that's written by a king. You explain how the king's point of view affects their opinion on a historical event. A king is going to have a different opinion about a rebellion of peasants than a peasant who's in the rebellion would have. And if you can successfully and accurately show that point of view, or POV, then you would be on your way to get document sourcing. So you have to do this twice. So the other means of sourcing a document besides point of view is it's the purpose of the document. When the document was written, what was the intent of the author? Like, I think of propaganda all the time. So like you see a piece of wartime propaganda from World War I, and it's meant to get people to enlist in the army, and it uses patriotism as evidence to do that, and you can successfully show the purpose or the intent, you can get that document sourcing point. So purpose, think of as intent of the author. What do they want the reader, the consumer, to think? It's almost like they're kind of pushing they're kind of persuading them to think a certain way. So purpose, intent, persuasion sometimes. Next one is called historical context. So this one is going to sound similar to the contextualization point in your intro, but it's different. You're contextualizing the document, not the overall time period of the prompt. So specifically contextualizing the document. In my teacher perspective, point of view perhaps, I actually think contextualization is one of the easier ones to get. But I've found my students often are they don't have a super strong grasp of dates and timelines, and I understand that. So they often stay away from this one. But personally, I like this one the most. That's my opinion. And then the last one is audience. So audience is who was the document written for? And how would that change the message of the document? So think about like, you have a law written by Parliament, and it's meant to reduce child labor. Who is that document meant for? Was it meant for the upper classes? No, probably not. It was probably meant for the lower classes to maybe make them more agreeable to the political party that's in power. So think about who the document was written for and how that changes the message. Think about, for example, if you go to a party on a Friday night, things I never did in high school, and your parents on the next day ask you, what did you do at that party? You're going to give a very different explanation to your parents than you would your best friend, because your audience changed. So, out of those 7 documents, you need to pick at least 2 of those documents to source. And you can use any portion of point of view, purpose, contextualization, or audience. So if you completely understand point of view really well, then use point of view twice. Fine by me. You can mix them. Fine by me. It doesn't matter. You just have to source the document at least twice. So my acronym to remember all the different parts of document sourcing is called CAP POV. The C means contextualization. The A, audience. P, purpose, and then POV, point of view, CAP POV. Some AP history teachers use HIPPO. I've not liked that one, but I like CAP POV. I've heard some teachers do POV plus, but overall, it's all the same stuff. Document sourcing, point of view, purpose, contextualization, and audience. So do that twice, and you get that point. My recommendation, yet again, is going to be maybe try it 3 times to kind of give you that buffer. So say you only attempted document sourcing on 2 different documents. One of them was correct sourcing, the other one was not. Automatically, you don't get that point. But if you attempt 3 documents, that gives you a 1 document of a buffer, like a safety. So I say try and source 3 different documents to kind of play it safe. All right, and finally, this point is similar to the LEQ's complexity point, with now some additions to gain this complexity point. So the same thing from the LEQ, if you have a nuanced argument, you show multiple causes of something and ultimately take a side which one's more important, then you're on your way to complexity. Out of these 7 documents, remember I told you the way they word these prompts is they're going to say, this historical event, was it caused by this or caused by that? They want you to do one or the other, but in reality, they really want you to show that nuance. So out of those 7 documents, you're going to find the documents will kind of sort themselves into 2 camps. Either it'll be this cause or that cause. And then, because it's the College Board, they like having fun with this, there will be some documents that could sound like they can go both ways, and that's fine, as long as you explain your interpretation of the document correctly, and it's historically defensible, that's fine. So usually out of those 7 documents, there's 1 or 2 documents that are kind of oddballs that can be explained on either side of that argument. So that is a portion of the complexity here. So that should not change from the LEQ, but here is what has changed quite significantly from the old DBQ rubric. This section here. So earlier in this presentation, I told you to use 7 documents in writing your essay. This is one of the reasons why I told you to do this. If you successfully use all 7 documents to support your argument, whether it's your main argument, your counter argument, your secondary argument, whatever, then you get that complexity point. Awesome. That's pretty doable. I recommend this. I think that's doable. So use all 7 documents. Make sure it clearly supports your argument. You could potentially get the complexity. Nice job. The other way second way to get complexity is you source not 2 documents correctly, you source 4 documents correctly. That's a big ask, honestly, but if you are really good at document sourcing, this could be a way to get this. Now, one thing you have to be very careful of, it does say you're sourcing those documents to actually support your argument. So you have to be conscientious while you're writing. When you're sourcing, you're actually showing how it supports your argument. So out of all the ways of getting complexity, this might be the most difficult, quite honestly. Doing it on 4 documents is a challenge, especially in a timed essay. All right, and this one I've already kind of mentioned. This is that historical nuance. You show multiple causes of something, and then you ultimately pick a side and argue why it's the most important cause, to use that example. So to recap, I would say this one might be the most doable. So I would say go for it, right? Use 7 documents to support your argument, and you might get complexity. All right, that is it for this portion of the presentation. I'm going to make another presentation to really explain what document sourcing looks like here. So stay tuned for that. Thank you so much. Have a good one.